I'm not in the habit of commenting on other podcasters' efforts twice in a row, but however good they are, and Andrew Doyle is right up there, possibly the best, certainly one of the best. He's done another one. It's called 5 Ways to Tell If You're an Authoritarian, and it is good, but it's strangely conventional. In a way that he repeats or seems to be strongly under the cultural influence of, I suppose some people might call it a trope, but certainly an embedded misunderstanding. So I'm going to read this time and again make a few passing remarks at the end. It's in the transcript below. 1 or 2 links interesting, particularly to a new website which I've set up. It isn't intended to comment much, but it, as you tell from the title, what it does is called malinformation.org.uk. Malinformation is the latest establishment expression, fancy word, after misinformation, disinformation, all the other nonsense. And I think it supposes that some information, though it's true, is bad. It's a sort of censor's justification wrapped up in terminology. The loading of many words can cause a lot of, it's like a subterfuge, can create misunderstanding and, in cases, deliberate manipulation, and malinformation is a beaut. The authorities are admitting what they're doing in a piece of jargon. I think that was remarked by the person who runs Lotus Eaters, which is also included in the list on malinformation.org.uk. Site's still in very early days yet, and it's very much a bread and butter cheap one. But the actual purpose doesn't need anything sophisticated, and hopefully it'll be useful. Anyway, on to my little effort. It is a sort of critique of what Andrew Doyle wrote, but only in one small aspect. So I have no intention, like ideologues do. They find a small fault, then they stomp off and say, oh, well, the whole thing's nonsense then. No. Ideologues are not really very good at seeking the meaning. They're seeking the conformity. And if something doesn't conform, one small mistake or deviation, then they can send the whole thing to the dustbin. Trash can, if you're an American. Anyway, here we go. It's entitled, The Best Commentators Still Make Dangerous Mistakes, Leading to Imminent Political and even Social Collapse. Andrew Doyle's latest article is very useful, but like John Stuart Mill, he makes the all too common mistake conflating social or political power with authority. This confusion is highly damaging because it distracts from something fundamental. He observes, Mill puts it this way, the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. His own good, either physical or moral, is not sufficient warrant, etc., etc. What Mill should have said is as follows. The only purpose for which authority can be rightfully exercised. The difference is in the words power and authority. Despite this slip, avoiding the ideologue's principle that one deviation is sufficient to render the whole thing nonsense, the message of his article is indisputably useful and correct. Imprecision about the nature of political and social power has blurred political focus and understanding for centuries, with arguably immense knock-on cost to society, civilization, and even humanity. Power as a construct, it's not some kind of elemental, indivisible, elemental force. In physics, formulae exist such as watts equals volts times amps, force equals mass times acceleration, I think. I put velocity there, I better check that in a minute. Volts equals amps times resistance, and so on. Social and political power rises from combination and metamorphosis of knowledge and authority. Further precision reveals that knowledge is conscious or potentially conscious information. An example of information that does not comply is the millions of electrical impulses making an image on a TV screen. The apparatus turns them from information into knowledge, assuming it's true, on the screen. Precision in language is essential to avoid coming to the wrong conclusion or an incapacity to grasp what's going on. It's essential to good education. Mill's treatment of power appears to imply that power is authority. On the face of it, it's as mistaken as saying watts equals amps. So deeply ingrained are cultural influences, Andrew Doyle, one of the best of political commentators, went along with this. If I were a slave master and ordered my slaves to attack a rival country, only to see them escape their miserable existence because I didn't know they would be welcomed with open arms, ignorant use of my authority gave them their freedom. The impotence of unintended consequence reveals the mistake of conflating power with authority. It's hard to see anyone saying that my decision was a display of power, more that I was an arrogant fool. Understanding political history and modern politics calls for close examination of how authority is usurped or vested in individuals, groups, or abstractions, such as institutions, corporations, nations, or countries. Accompanying this is the need to consider how information flows to where authority resides, and the process of combination and metamorphosis into social and political power. Treating power as if it were fundamental obscures essential perspectives to a sophisticated view of politics, as if reducing Titian's Assumption of the Virgin, I have a link to that in a transcript, it's a fantastic picture, to a Disney cartoon, or the Great Library of Ephesus to something made out of Lego. Imprecision is a major cause of today's primitive, cruddy and threatening politics that beset Western civilization. Cultural hang-ups are a major cause. Most people still believe information is power, or, as in this case, power is authority, which implies information is authority. I suppose in an academic way that does exist. The system of authority is essential at universities to discipline their efforts to preserve knowledge and discover more. Of course, if you let it seep out into real politics, then we get serious trouble, which is part of the reason why we have the chaos or impending chaos today. Anyway, the confusion is down to a simple imprecision leading to misunderstanding, and much of the political chaos threatening economic disaster. The intelligentsia needs rescuing from monumental artificial stupidity before we all pay the price. That Doyle, one of the best, seems unaware, speaks of how close the ship is to sinking. I have the highest respect for him, and he's listed on malinformation.org.uk, along with a few notably less worthy. If you can suggest others, I would appreciate it. So the key principle which needs to be understood is knowledge and authority combine and metamorphose into social and political power. It follows, information is not power. Power is not authority. Knowledge isn't power. Associated with this is that influence is not power, but it can empower others, or, if mistaken or malign, it can engineer impotence of unintended consequences arising from the ignorant exercise of authority. That's very important. Misguided use of the word power prevents an essential grasp of politics. Precision matters. You hear a lot of people talk about political science or social science and so on and so forth. And they think somehow or other that, read a few pages of Marx, what have you, and Marx was absolutely fixated, thinking he was some kind of scientist. They're almost deluded. Not least because the imprecision that's still flying around indicates that even if it was a matter of being scientific when it comes to politics and sociology and society, they have zero or very little precision. Even the most highly intelligent, acerbic, cutting and perceptive commentators like Andrew Doyle, even they are not that precise sometimes with language. I know I make many mistakes, so I'm far from innocent. But at least I'm aware of the need for precision without being pedantic. So that, for instance, if someone makes an imprecise use of the word, like, for instance, power, I'm not going to say, oh, well, the rest of you, what you think must be nonsense because you made this small slip up. That's nonsense. Because one of the guiding principles of learning anything is to seek the meaning. And if there's a little block and it's a bit odd, that can't be right, rather than trash the whole thing, go on, listen some more. And this is absolutely significant, more so when you're looking at the intersubjective. Because the intersubjective, which is hugely influential, it has no power as such, because it has no agency anyway, and doesn't physically exist. It accommodates contradiction and disagreement. So when you're busily studying society and politics, which is highly influenced by society, it's important to understand that society accommodates incoherent and contradictory entities. They are possible in the intersubjective because the intersubjective has no consciousness, can't reason, and is not subject to the laws of logic. Of course, there's an awful lot of logical stuff in there, a lot of wisdom, a lot of kind and thoughtful ideas, beliefs, objectives and so on and so forth. There's also a barrel load of rubbish, half-baked ideas and so on and so forth. So, to be able to get a handle on society, just applying crude analytical methods or pseudo-scientific approaches, you don't get anywhere. It just turns into, it's almost a farce. And sociologists claiming in some way in the scientific are in an oxymoron, social science, are admitting that they have no idea what they're really doing. If you can deal with non-logic, then you've got a much greater chance of getting a handle on culture, society, and even history, because history, whether we like it or not, is always going to be skewed one way or another to a certain extent, depending upon social objectives, prejudices, beliefs, so on and so forth. Now that doesn't reduce the significance of looking at evidence in history when you're digging up ruins and so on and so forth. That's still vital. But essentially an understanding of history in terms of humanity, it's very hard to avoid the prejudices and beliefs of each age. The important thing is to not destroy the evidence in the process, which is all the rage at the time being, bunging statues into the sea, claiming that people of a different skin colour built Stonehenge and so on and so forth. Humans built Stonehenge. It's wonderful. I find it hard, really hard, to respect people who believe that the type of skin someone has, the colour of their skin, somehow makes them elementally different from others. It's breathtakingly primitive, to a point of obscenity and childish. I don't mean to insult children, I apologise. It just can make me quite angry, which reduces me to impotence anyway, so I'll try and stop that. So anyway, back to what we were talking about. Precision is the matter, but precision without small-minded, I'm not going to seek meaning because you weren't precise in the way you should have been attitudes. And that's very important. You can be precise and still seek a meaning. More so, if you are precise, you're more likely to find it. Because in that process, you can handle the entities of the intersubjective, where the rules of existence are different. So you can have these entities which could not possibly exist in physical reality, and be able to start understanding how the world of society, as opposed to the physical world, works, and how the two relate, how the intersubjective relates to physical reality, and how subjectivity is all in this. The chain of dependence remains always the same. The intersubjective depends upon countless numbers almost of subjectivities. It's you, me, billions of other people, or certainly many millions, and they depend essentially on physical reality. So the physical chain of dependence is there. There's no way that intersubjective can change the laws of physics or mathematics or whatever. I mean, it's almost surreal that people believe that can be the case. That doesn't mean to say the intersubjective isn't massively influential. Hence the remark I made at the end of the formal reading about influence is not power, but it can empower others, or in certain cases, disempower them. Now these distinctions are vital, and you can't make a distinction unless you're reasonably precise. So there you go. Thanks for listening to this. My apologies to Andrew Doyle, because he is one of the best, and I'll leave him alone for the time being after this, unless he comes up with another cracker. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.